My name's Emanuel Preciado, or Manny. My title, I am a assistant teaching professor in the Department of Geography, Planning, and Recreation here at NAU at Northern Arizona University. And I think my training, my background as a planner, always makes me consider um, intersections, all the various elements that come into play for projects. So in terms of sustainability, it leads me to a variety of different layers, the materials themselves, right? Building something that's made with sustainable materials, um, the workforce, being paid at a fair wage, or just the treatment of workers. So there's a sustainability, I guess you could say there too, of labor or fair practice or ethics, um, and economics. Right, it's a real issue in terms of how sustainable the project is. What's the source of the funding? Things of that nature. Right, is it public funds, private funds? Did it take away from something else? Did it include private actors? Right, things like this. So I guess that's what I would think of is sustainable, broadly speaking, for something to be truly sustainable. Right, thinking of all the various facets that would go into the creation of, let's say, like a new affordable housing project or something like that. I think one thing that could be done is I focus a lot on community building, community development, um, maybe building houses in a way that creates more interaction. Little things. I guess back to like a planning perspective or a building perspective, things like porches, communal type spaces, even if they're just like front yards. Small things like this actually make a significant difference and becoming more inviting or creating interaction amongst community members, as opposed to huge lots or major setbacks like from the front gate to the front door, basically, right? Which just creates these massive barriers. Which in some cases that could be argued that folks like privacy and having their own space, but in some ways it kind of counters the ability for folks to have communal space or interact more often. So yeah, so things like that, like a porch, something very simple like this, which houses are not really built like that anymore. Where California style like bungalows, right? That have these like massive porches in the front, and that's the point of them, for interaction. I start thinking about, I don't know, the materials, where you're sourcing materials from. Are we able to recycle? I know we have a lot of housing stock, so maybe there's not really a need to expand buildings, but maybe find ways to utilize existing buildings that are underutilized, vacant. Perhaps we could change regulations or something. I don't know, to control things like Airbnb and you know housing stock being turned into these kind of businesses. Um, so maybe stuff like that might be a more sustainable model as opposed to this concept of constant expansion, right? Which kind of falls in the thinking of of a capitalist society, right? That we have endless resources and endless space, which is not true. And I know in the California case, there's a lot of houses that sit there vacant, and some of the countries do a better job of utilizing those vacant properties, with incentives or regulations. So I would probably lean in that direction. Yeah, cost. Yeah. Um, as I'm from San Diego, California, or the northern part of San Diego, California, one of the most expensive places to live in the country, and just came from grad school in Orange County, which almost equally as expensive. Um, and I saw some pretty extreme stuff. I mean, I did a walking survey as a master's student in urban planning, just to kind of see how people are living. And just to give you an example, a two-bedroom apartment in Orange County, you often will have up to 8 to 10 people renting it. So they're splitting these things with like blankets and things like that. And I was kind of like taken aback that this was how a lot of the units were being filled, multiple families or just groups of like roommates. And this is all due to the economics because no one can afford to live there otherwise. Um, so that's a picture of the reality. Yeah. And I've learned some about affordable housing projects. My understanding is that they're often not affordable, that they're still at a price point that's not really accessible, is often what I've seen. And the demand is so high. So there's like, at least in Southern California, places like Orange County, these could be 2 to 5 year waiting lists. So it's pretty extreme. Yeah, the stock is really low. So even if you qualify and all these things, it can take 5 years, and that's if you get selected, right, or get an opportunity. So it's a challenge. It's generally always
Yeah.
rentals. Yeah, yeah. In the city like Santa Ana, for example, where I was doing a lot of research, it's by far, it's like, I think some, I don't want to give a statistic,
Yeah.
but it's a majority renter city. It's a place that the organizers there, or the sort of social movements, the collective action taking place, have pretty much settled with the idea that there is no opportunity for home ownership, so they specifically are looking just for like rent control measures and ways of reducing the cost of living. Home ownership is so out of reach at this point for some communities in the U.S. that it's not even like something they try to strategize for anymore. It's just so not a thing anymore. Yeah, so a lot of the organizing is specifically around things like rent control, yeah, in cities like Santa Ana, and they've had some success in it, while some neighboring cities have passed it already, like in Los Angeles, right? But even then, it comes with some caveats where folks can kind of work around them in some ways. Some of the stuff I thought was pretty interesting with some of the groups that were aligned is I got involved with social movements around primarily land access for food production and urban agriculture, but they were very much involved in networks with other groups, and definitely groups working on housing. I did see some successes of organizing around like a home, a resident who was going to get evicted from, let's say, a single family home, and they've been there for a really long period of time. And for whatever reason, they didn't fall back on behind on their payments or anything, but the owner decided to move on, or to that they want to do something else, and they what did I see? Some kind of rally and protest, and the end result was that they were able to use a community land trust, so a partner nonprofit that was able to absorb some of those costs. And essentially have victory in terms of allowing the resident to stay in the home. I saw a few more. These are pretty rare, these instances, but I saw a few of these in Los Angeles as well, in a community called El Sereno. They have the El Sereno Community Land Trust, and they've had some successes as well in kind of halting evictions and finding means in terms of economic means, money, to be able to either acquire the home, like to purchase it, or to just kind of help out the resident to to stay there via this community land trust. So I'm kind of always interested in these sort of radical alternatives, through grassroots organizing. So I guess if I was getting more involved in housing, I would probably pursue that avenue of, how can community land trusts help, I guess at-risk tenants, if that's a term, to help them keep their property or maybe purchase property. And a large wave of people from California who just either move to the eastern parts or start moving into like, Nevada, Arizona, these kind of states, right? That's the migration pattern. Yeah, and I have to say it's all, the catalyst is housing. Yeah, for this great migration, right? Yeah, which has taken a huge population from like Los Angeles into cities like Riverside, but moved out even more east. Right? Maybe the expansion of rent control. I presented some of these kind of scenarios in my classes here, and I realized that Arizona has quite a bit of legislation that kind of restricts some of this activity that I've been used to working with in terms of community land trusts, worker cooperatives, things of this nature. There's just not as much funding or political will is probably the big blockade here for these types of projects. And that would include rent control, as there's legislation against rent control, I can find out, statewide. But some cities are looking to currently pass initiatives to bypass that. So they're definitely looking to implement these types of strategies, but that's probably that's what I've been taught, I guess, right? That's just the arena I just came from. I would look to try to implement those tools or those strategies here. So having interconnectivity with other elements. Working with farms and gardens, I noticed that there is quite a big interest in folks wanting to be involved at different levels, as the work does involve a lot of labor, right? So it's like, to what degree would you like to be involved? One of the things that the farm I worked at did is a community composting program. That's a pretty good way to get folks to be able to, let's say, donate their food scraps, that sort of thing, and be able to pick up like something like a final product. So whether it be a plant or a final process compost that they're able to implement in their home, that sort of thing. Those relationships led to, all this interaction basically between the farmers and homeowners as they would kind of trade, right? Farmers would go and help trim the trees, for example, while homeowners would donate like fruit. So all this interaction started to take place. And all that was informal. So maybe creating housing systems that kind of formally set those systems up, maybe even hiring a person or a crew of people to do that work, I think could create some community cohesion in a deeper way than simply having, the community garden. right? Which is just open for everyone to sort of, do with what they please. Yeah, having I think a more robust, intentional system, right, that has like humans that are there dedicated, hopefully somehow funded, right, and paid for their work, to be able to kind of fill that gap, as there seems to be an interest in folks wanting to garden and compost and do these various things, but people are busy or don't have the skill set. So just having that kind of, I don't know, a support system, a person or people who can help with that, I think could be a part of some interesting community projects. Yeah.